I'm an architect, right? Not the kind who designs buildings, though I could probably draft a decent blueprint if you gave me the parameters. I design systems. Specifically, logistics and supply chain systems. I build things that are supposed to be efficient, reliable, and utterly resistant to unexpected failure. My professional life is about optimizing flow, eliminating weak points, and ensuring the cargo gets from point A to point B exactly when the manifest says it will. I live in a world of predictable variables. And for 12 years, so did my marriage to Sarah. We had the classic American dream setup. House in the suburbs of Seattle, the kind with good schools, a big backyard, and a commute that wasn't soul-crushing. I had my stable high-level job downtown, and Sarah, she was a high school counselor. She dealt with the emotional chaos of teenagers. I dealt with the calm, clean logic of global shipping routes. It was a perfect complementary system. I was the anchor. She was the sail. People always said we were the stable ones. Not the flashiest, maybe. Not the couple always jetting off to Bali, but the ones you'd call when your life went sideways. We were the benchmark for it works. We were the system that couldn't be hacked. The first blip, the very first time the internal alarm went off, was about 8 months ago. It was a Tuesday. She was normally home by 5:30. She was late, which wasn't unheard of. A tough parent-teacher conference, a kid having a meltdown, but she hadn't texted. I was making my famous turkey chili. The aroma of cumin and smoked paprika was hanging heavy in the kitchen. And I remember looking at the clock, 6:15 p.m. No call, no text. When the garage door finally groaned open at 6:45, she walked in looking different. Not disheveled, not stressed, but recalibrated. Like a machine that had just undergone an unexpected but pleasant software update. "Hey babe, sorry," she said, tossing her keys into the bowl on the counter. "Ran late. Board meeting got totally derailed." "Board meeting?" I asked, stirring the chili. "I thought you only had those on Thursdays." She didn't miss a beat. "All right, this was a special one. Budget review. You know how those go." She leaned in for a quick peck, but the gesture felt perfunctory, like a necessary data exchange to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Her coat smelled faintly of something that wasn't her usual perfume. Something woodsy, something new. I let it go. One anomaly does not constitute a systemic failure. In my job, we call it noise. You discard the noise, you focus on the signal, but then the noise started getting louder. The phone usage. She'd always been on her phone, sure, but now it was locked down. Face ID always facing her. Texts read with a strange, intense concentration, and then the screen instantly flipped over if I walked into the room. One night, I asked to use her phone to call an Uber because mine was dead. She tensed up so fast her whole body went rigid. "Just use the iPad, Ethan, it's easier," she snapped. A little too quickly, a little too sharply. I took the iPad, but I didn't forget that flicker of panic in her eyes. It was a tiny crack in the veneer of the system, a vulnerability I hadn't accounted for. I started analyzing the data. It wasn't surveillance, not yet. It was observation, the way a good architect watches traffic patterns before designing a new highway interchange. Data point 1, the gym bag. Sarah hadn't stepped into a gym in years. She hated sweating. Suddenly, she was hitting the new boutique spin studio 3 mornings a week at 5 a.m. Except, the gym bag was always dry when she came home. The shoes weren't dusty or worn. They looked like they'd just been taken out of the box. And she never complained about sore muscles. Data point 2, the commute. Her office was exactly 14.2 miles from our driveway. That's a 28-minute drive at rush hour max. Her Google Maps history, which I casually accessed one morning by syncing her phone to our car's CarPlay while she was showering. A small, justifiable breach for system integrity, showed repeated deliberate deviations. She was consistently pulling off the highway at the same exit, stopping for 45 minutes, and then resuming the drive to work. The stop, a generic mid-range coffee shop next to a corporate park. Data point 3, the money. She bought new lingerie. Not the cheap stuff. The expensive, lacy, I want to be seen in this lingerie. She hid the receipts, but I saw the transaction on the joint credit card statement. $450 at a boutique downtown. She hadn't worn any of it for me. I can say that with absolute certainty. Our sex life hadn't exactly flatlined, but it had certainly settled into a predictable, non-turbulent cruise altitude. This purchase was a massive, unscheduled payload, 3 distinct, non-conforming data points. The noise was turning into a signal. My professional protocol kicked in: analyze, identify, mitigate. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Confrontation is for amateurs. It burns your bridge, tips your hand, and forces the adversary into defensive lockdown. I needed to understand the entire threat model first. Who was the attack vector? What was the motive? What assets were compromised? I knew the answer before I even started the deep dive. The board meeting, the pristine gym bag, the expensive lingerie, it all pointed to a single external factor. An unauthorized connection had been established to my system. I called my best friend, Mike. He runs a small batch coffee roasting company, a world away from my corporate logistics. But he's brilliant, stable, and speaks in pure, unvarnished truth. Mike, I need to talk, I said. We met at the dive bar we used to frequent in college. I ordered a neat whiskey, something I only did when I was processing a high-stress failure scenario. I laid out the data points one by one. The silence between the clinking of glasses was heavy. Mike looked at me, his eyes wide and sympathetic. Ethan, man, you're tracing her like a container ship with a GPS tracker. It's the only way I know how to process uncertainty, I admitted. I build things to be certain. Her behavior is an uncertainty. He leaned in. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's not a budget review and a new spin class. That's a meetup and a new reason to feel hot. You're looking at an affair, pal. The classic suburban model. She's meeting some guy on the way to work for a coffee and maybe more. And she's spending money on him because the thrill is worth the price of a fancy bra she'll never wear for you. The truth, delivered without any soft language, hit me with the force of an intermodal freight crash. It wasn't anger I felt, not initially. It was a cold, devastating sense of systemic failure. My system, the one I had architected and maintained for a decade, had a critical zero-day exploit. Who is it? I asked, my voice flat. Doesn't matter yet, Mike said, shaking his head. What matters is what you do now. You've got the evidence of a breach. You have two options. You can hit the red button, confront her, demand answers, burn the whole thing down. Or you can play the long game. You can find the source, understand the compromise, and then execute a strategic recovery. I took a slow sip of the whiskey. Recovery. I wasn't going to beg or cry or yell. That was the emotional response. I was going to find the vulnerability, and I was going to leverage it to my maximum advantage. I was an architect of systems, and if my wife thought she could walk away from my meticulously structured life without paying the cost of the disruption, she was about to learn a very hard lesson about supply chain penalties. I'm not hitting the red button, Mike, I said, setting the glass down. The emotional response is inefficient. I'm going to run a full penetration test on my own marriage. I need the admin login, the full audit trail, and the name of the rogue user. I want to see the complete log of the compromise before I decide on the final disposition of the asset. Mike looked at me, a mixture of horror and awe in his eyes. Jesus, Ethan, you're going dark. No, I replied, standing up. I'm just optimizing the divorce process. She thinks she's in an affair. I think she's just entered my new distribution network, and she's about to find out exactly what my inventory is worth. The game had changed. It was no longer a marriage. It was a hostile takeover, and I had just become the system administrator of my own revenge. I left the bar, the Seattle rain washing the streets, feeling colder and clearer than I had in years. The chili was still on the stove. I figured I'd feed it to the dog. Sarah wouldn't be eating at home much anymore anyway. The new schedule, the new variables. I was ready to track them all. The hunt was on. The decision to treat my marriage like a security audit didn't just change my strategy, it changed my internal operating system. The emotional turmoil, the panic, the sadness, the impulse to rage, all that junk data was compartmentalized, quarantined. What remained was a pure, cold focus. My goal was no longer reconciliation. It was maximum information retrieval and strategic asset protection. I started with the car. Sarah had a new sedan, leased just last year. Most modern vehicles, especially the high-end imports, are basically rolling data hubs. I went to the dealership on my lunch break, ostensibly for a warranty check on my own truck. While I was there, I had a very discreet, off-the-books conversation with the head service technician, a guy named Leo who I used to play pickup basketball with. $100 and a couple of promises about an in on a logistics contract later. I had the full technical readout of Sarah's vehicle. Turns out, the car stored a detailed history of every destination she navigated to using the built-in GPS, complete with timestamps and duration. The coffee shop stop wasn't just a coffee shop. It was the address for a co-working space called the Launchpad, 10 minutes off her usual route. The log showed her pulling in, parking, and staying for an average of 42 to 50 minutes 3 times a week. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday morning. The next layer of data acquisition was trickier. Her work laptop. Since COVID, she did a lot of counseling sessions from home. Her old work bag had a zippered compartment I knew she never checked. I bought a small military-grade USB data logger online, about the size of a thumb drive, designed to mirror network traffic. One night, while she was doing yoga in the living room, I went to her office, plugged the logger into her router, and connected her laptop via a short auxiliary cable, all under the guise of optimizing the home network for better streaming. She didn't even look up. Too focused on her downward dog, over the next 4 days, that device gave me everything. Not her counseling files, I wouldn't cross that line, but her metadata, her browser history, her search queries, and most importantly, her email activity outside of school hours. The rogue user's name was Alex Vance. Alex Vance was everything I wasn't, or at least everything I had stopped being. He was a digital nomad and a creative consultant who ran some kind of marketing startup from the Launchpad. His LinkedIn profile, which I found easily because he was in Sarah's recently viewed list, showed a guy with tousled hair, expensive eyeglasses, and a bio full of buzzwords like disruption and scalable synergy. He looked like a cologne ad. I looked like an architect who valued utility over flair. The emails were the real treasure trove. They didn't use romantic language. They used the language of shared escape. Can't wait for our morning reset. The energy around you is the only synergy that matters these days. Alex, me too. It's the only place I can breathe. 5 days felt like 5 years. Tuesday, 7:15, same table. Sarah. They were short, coded confirmations of their rendezvous. The coffee shop was their anchor point. The 5 a.m. spin class was her cover for leaving early and getting to him by 7:15. She wasn't cheating on me for the sex, at least not primarily. She was cheating on me for the novelty. For the feeling that her life, which she saw as predictable and safe with me, was finally getting a disruption. The moment I had the name and the pattern, the game shifted from observation to control. I knew their schedule. I knew their meeting place. I knew the emotional currency of the transaction. I had achieved root access. Now the hard part, the confrontation. I wasn't going to ambush them. That was the cheap emotional thrill of a melodrama. I needed a setting where I could deliver my information with maximum psychological impact, where she would be forced to face the efficiency of my detection. I chose Friday. Friday mornings were their third meetup of the week. I cleared my calendar, telling my team I had a critical systems failure to address. I put on the suit I usually reserved for board meetings, not because I wanted to look good for her, but because I wanted to look like the CEO of the relationship she was trying to liquidate. I drove to the Launchpad at 7 a.m. It was exactly as tacky as I imagined. Exposed brick, industrial lighting, and too many people with MacBooks nursing single-origin lattes. I saw Sarah first. She was sitting at a corner table, her back to the main room, talking animatedly to Alex Vance, the cologne ad. He had his hand resting on her wrist, a gesture of intimate ownership. I didn't storm in. I walked. My pace was measured, my breathing even. I carried a manila folder, heavy with the full data report. I approached their table and simply stood there. They were mid-giggle. When Sarah finally looked up, the color drained from her face faster than a failed transaction. It was a beautiful thing to witness. The shock was total. The mask of special budget review and spiritual reset evaporated, leaving behind the raw panic of a caught perp. Alex, the disruptor, looked utterly confused. "Dude, you okay? Can we help you?" I didn't look at him. My eyes were locked on Sarah's. "It's 7:25 a.m., Sarah," I said, my voice low and level, cutting through the pretentious cafe buzz. "Your calendar says you should be pulling into the school parking lot right now, preparing for your first student session. Instead, you're here, 3 times a week. For the last 8 months." She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was trying to compile a lie, but the circuit was jammed. I placed the manila folder on the table between them. It landed with a soft, authoritative thud. "This is the audit report," I continued, tapping the folder. "It contains the vehicle's GPS logs, the network metadata from the home router, including your coded email confirmations, and a full financial analysis of the luxury items purchased but never utilized within the primary domestic network." I finally looked at Alex Vance. He was pale now. The creative consultant suddenly realizing he was dealing with a very uncreative, very expensive situation. And you, Alex, I said, leaning my hands on the table. You are the unauthorized external access point, the threat vector. You probably thought this was all very liberating, very disruptive. You were wrong. You were just an inefficient detour. Sarah finally found her voice. Ethan, please. Not here. Her plea was not for my feelings, but for her reputation. You chose the location, Sarah, I reminded her. You chose the public stage for your authenticity. I just chose the timing for the announcement. Let's talk about asset allocation, shall we? I pulled out one sheet from the folder and slid it toward her. It was a printout from my lawyer. Not the divorce papers, that was Act 3, but an injunction. Effective immediately, I said, my voice hardening. I have placed a freeze on all joint accounts and credit lines. You have immediate access to your separate checking account for necessary daily expenditures. The house is locked down. The locks have been changed. You will not return to the house without the presence of a third-party solicitor to supervise your belongings retrieval. You have 48 hours to secure a temporary residence. I looked at her wedding ring, still sparkling on her finger. You compromised the system, Sarah. You opened the door. Now you've been locked out. I'm not asking for answers. I'm not asking why. The data is self-explanatory. This relationship is no longer viable. I have initiated the system shutdown protocol. I turned my back on the stunned silence, leaving the manila folder on the table as a monument to my efficiency. As I walked out, I heard Alex Vance clear his throat, probably trying to launch a synergy pitch to his suddenly distressed asset. I got back to my office, and the first thing I did was call my lawyer. Execute the papers, I instructed, and send Sarah a simple, professional email with a link to a very specific document. The document was titled, Contingency Plan for Systemic Betrayal and Disruption of Domestic Operations. I sat back in my chair, the morning sun hitting my glass office. The chili was gone, the dog was happy, and the system was finally secure. The architecture of my new life was already taking shape. It was a messy human problem, but I had solved it with the clean, cold logic of a master architect. The confrontation was over. Now the decommissioning began. After the cafe confrontation, the entire process became clinically clean. I had achieved maximum control with minimal emotional expenditure. Sarah didn't call, didn't text, didn't rage. She followed the protocol, which was a chilling testament to how effective the audit report had been. She realized the system she compromised was smarter than her escape plan. Her attorney, a sharp-looking woman named Brenda, contacted mine, Mark, within 3 hours. The first communication wasn't a defense or an attack. It was a surrender. My client acknowledges her culpability and wishes to proceed with an uncontested dissolution of marriage, Brenda wrote. My lawyer just forwarded the email to me with a single emoji, but I wasn't after a quick surrender. I was after a cost-benefit analysis of her disruption. I needed her to understand the true price of her liberation. The house, our house, was the main asset. It was where we'd spent 12 years building the illusion of permanence. I didn't want the house. It was just a structure polluted by poor metadata. But I made sure she thought I did. My legal strategy was built on information asymmetry. I knew everything about Alex Vance that she didn't know about me. While she was packing a suitcase under the supervision of a stone-faced notary, I was preparing the final financial assault. Alex Vance, the disruptor, was the key. My forensics team, two of my best guys who owed me a favor and operated outside the standard legal framework, did a deep dive on his finances. He wasn't a creative consultant. He was a highly leveraged grifter. His startup was a couple of maxed-out credit cards and a borrowed office space. He was living on borrowed time and the emotional instability of bored suburban wives. I knew Sarah, the school counselor, had recently inherited a modest sum from her grandmother, about $250,000. I also knew from the intercepted emails that Alex had been subtly pitching Sarah on investing in his scalable synergy. It was a classic confidence game, and Sarah, starved for excitement and validation, was the perfect mark. The day of the settlement meeting arrived. It was in Mark's office downtown, a sterile room with a view of the Puget Sound. Sarah walked in looking haggard, not like the recalibrated woman from the cafe. She had lost her sparkle. The light of disruption had gone out. Alex Vance wasn't there. Apparently, he had a critical client meeting. The meeting started with Mark presenting my demands. They were tough. I demanded almost 70% of the equity in the house, a significantly higher split than Washington State's standard 50-50 community property division, citing wasteful expenditure of marital assets, the lingerie, the secret meetup costs, etc. It was aggressive, designed to wear her down. Brenda, her lawyer, started to push back. Ethan, this is unreasonable. We're prepared to accept a 60-40 split in your favor, but 70 is unconscionable. It will bankrupt her. That was my cue. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the polished mahogany table. I didn't raise my voice. Sarah, I said, ignoring the lawyers, let's talk about the true cost of your poor judgment. I know about your grandmother's inheritance. I know about Alex Vance's startup. I know you're planning to finance his next scalable synergy with that money. Sarah's eyes snapped to mine, filled with genuine terror now. That's none of your business, Ethan. That's my money. It becomes my business when your emotional poor judgment threatens your future financial stability, I replied. You want freedom, Sarah? You want to be liberated? Fine, but I am not going to let you walk out of my life and into a financial black hole because some creative consultant flattered you into giving him your retirement fund. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a second folder, much thinner this time. I slid it to Brenda, not Sarah. That folder contains a fully documented, non-anonymous whistleblower report on Alex Vance's business practices, detailing specific instances of potential wire fraud, tax evasion, and unregistered securities offerings. It's prepped, notarized, and ready to be filed with the SEC, the Washington State Attorney General, and the IRS. Brenda's eyes scanned the document's headings. Her professional posture crumbled. She knew immediately that if this was filed, Alex Vance's life would be over. And Sarah's inheritance, the money she planned to use to buy her new life, would likely be pulled into a federal investigation. Now, here is my final offer, I said, putting a single piece of paper in the center of the table. You get 50% of the equity in the house, the standard 50-50. You walk away clean. However, you sign an immediate, irrevocable, legally binding document stating that you will not, under any circumstance, loan, gift, or invest any portion of your liquid assets with Alex Vance, or any associated entity for a period of 5 years. You sever all financial ties with him, or this report gets filed, and your $250,000 is consumed by federal investigators. I leaned back. Your freedom, Sarah, is not just for me. Your true vulnerability is your need for validation, and Alex Vance is exploiting it. I am giving you a financial firewall against your own destructive impulse. You get your money and you get your new boyfriend. But you do not get to fund his incompetence with the security I spent 12 years building for you. The room was silent. Sarah realized the cruel genius of the move. I wasn't taking her money. I was saving it, but at the cost of her authentic new beginning. If she couldn't fund Alex, he would leave her. The disruptor would be disrupted. Brenda looked at Sarah, an entire conversation passing between them in a glance. Brenda nodded. Take the deal. Sarah's eyes were cold now, filled with a resentment that had replaced the terror. You're doing this just to hurt him, she whispered. No, Sarah, I corrected her, standing up to leave. I'm doing this to finalize the decommissioning process. I'm ensuring that the compromised asset, that's you, is removed from the network in a way that causes zero long-term damage to the stable environment. The house is an asset. The money is an asset. My peace of mind is the ultimate asset. Alex Vance is a vulnerability, and I'm simply patching the system. I didn't wait for her to sign. I didn't need to. The negotiation was over. The execution was now a formality. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. The divorce was signed 2 weeks later. Sarah moved out of the house into an apartment, still seeing Alex Vance, but as I predicted, within 3 months, the lack of a financial lifeline made him lose interest. The excitement vanished when she couldn't fund the synergy. I sold the house a month after that and moved into a new condo overlooking the city. A blank slate, a new server with robust security protocols. I kept the dog, the turkey chili recipe, and the lesson. People still ask me how I handled the divorce so quickly, so cleanly. They talk about closure and moving on. I just smile. They don't understand the difference between an emotional crisis and a system management failure. My marriage failed because I was running an outdated, unsecure system. The breach taught me to never trust a single point of failure again. I am Ethan the architect. I build things to last, and if they don't, I ensure their destruction is optimal, efficient, and irreversible. My new system is unhackable. And that, I realized, was the only revenge that truly mattered.